Howdy and welcome to the show. Cooper's Code focuses on legal issues and notable practitioners, distilling wisdom so we all achieve the best results for our clients. I'm Miles Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to sit down with Krista Mitzel, entrepreneur and business-savvy employment defense lawyer. Who better to help a business navigate the complexities involving people in the workplace than someone who owns a business herself? As an employment lawyer and people expert, Krista and our team help businesses, executives, and human resource professionals craft proactive and preventative strategies to comply with and stay ahead of the challenging and changing regulatory environment that helps protect employees. Krista is a sought-after Winston Wolfe, my words, not hers, for a company's stickiest people situations, ones that often others were unable to solve. She also serves as an adjunct professor at Golden Gate University Law School and is a frequent media commentator in print, television, and radio. I hope you enjoyed this dynamic conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. So please sit back and learn a bit about what not to do, who not to do it to, and what to do if someone in an organization has strayed from the true path. If you're enjoying what we do here with Cooper's Code, please help us extend our reach by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and consider sharing an episode with a friend. Welcome to the show, Krista.
Hi, Miles. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. I want to start just where we usually do with a little bit of your background in terms of who you are and how you found yourself in the area of law. What drew you to that in the first place?
Well, it goes back a long way, I think. I'm an only child. I grew up with my parents. My dad had a government job, and we always joked that, I wasn't allowed to say where he worked, so I just had to say he worked for the government. But I was always around lawyers, CPAs, professionals, and so I used to play office a lot, and I had this in my head that was the path I was going to take. And so as I grew up, I was very interested in politics and writing and journalism, and all of those different professions really lent themselves to the law. When I went to Berkeley, I worked for local councilmen and state assembly members, et cetera. And the lawyers were always in the background doing things. So I got really interested in how the law played into a lot of these different careers and paths. And so I decided to take a job with Senator Feinstein in DC. And again, working in politics, working behind all these issues, the lawyers were always in the mix. They were always in the Judiciary Committee. They were always looking into the policies. So I really got interested in, okay, this is a great job. I could do a lot with this kind of degree. So I came back to Cal, took the LSAT, and the rest is kind of the history of getting on the train tracks and going through that legal path. So it turned out to be a good one.
Did you grow up on the East Coast then?
No, I grew up in California. Okay. I'm born and raised Bay Area, grew up in Roseville up by Sacramento, and then I came back to go to Berkeley, and I went to USF for law school. So I've been in the Bay Area for, almost 30 years now.
Okay. But a divergence out to
yeah,
DC
so I spent 4 months in Washington, D.C. in college, more as a lengthened internship with Senator Feinstein. So that was a really fun time and, got me more interested in, okay, this is a really interesting career path. I got offered a job, but back then they weren't paying very much. So I thought, I need to go make more money. So my parents said, well, then go to grad school. That seemed like a good idea.
So once you got out of law school, where did you go from there in terms of, and I'm trying to just kind of recreate your path.
Yeah. So it is. I had a very traditional path in the sense that both summers between law school, when everyone gets internships, I worked for, big defense side law firms. So I worked for a law firm in Oakland and then worked for a law firm in San Francisco. That was back in the day when they offered you a job after you graduated. So I started my career at Sheppard Mullin here in San Francisco with a great group of people. I spent several years there. And then I moved over to Seyfarth Shaw and worked there for many years and ended my big firm career at Jackson Lewis. So I had so many great experiences at these firms, worked with amazing attorneys. I was trained by the best, and I really enjoyed that path. But at some point I kind of said to myself, is this what I want to do? I had a little, crisis after I got married and really wasn't sure. Do I want to try something else? Do I want to explore a different career? Is this how I want to spend the next, 20 years of my life? So I ended up taking a break. And in that break, I'd had a few of my clients start calling because at the last few firms, I'd built up 5 or 6 clients as a senior associate. And they started calling and needing help. And so on my little self-proclaimed sabbatical, my then husband said, well, what do you need to do to help them? And I said, well, I guess I need malpractice insurance. So I remember I got a malpractice policy, and me and an associate attorney ended up working on my kitchen table, walking the dogs at breaks. And that's how a law firm was born. So that was almost 15 years ago.
With your permission, I'd like to go into that a little bit more. I know people sometimes will take a break to kind of reflect on things, and that helps them clarify the path forward. It sounds like the path just kind of stopped its way to your door.
It really did. And looking back, I suppose I wish I'd been more, purposeful about it. I knew I always had that entrepreneurialism in me. My dad had always had side businesses. My parents worked on those. I always saw that spirit in our household. And yet I was really on this train tracks path of, go to the big law firms, do the summer associateship, work at the firms, then do this. But when I got to be more senior, I was starting to get burnt out already. Every firm, it was just wonderful work, but really hard work. And, one year I think I billed something like 2,500 hours. And that's a lot of working. That's a lot of hours. And I really kind of hit a wall. And I did need to have some self-reflection around that. But I wished I hadn't have gotten so stressed and so tired and so burnt out that it was almost not an option to take a break.
I know that for some of our listeners, because a lot of our listeners do contingent fee work, some of them have never had to bill, period.
Yes.
And so for those who haven't had that experience, if you're talking about 2,400, 2,500 hours of billable, what does that look like in terms of hours per week?
Yeah. So, even a regular schedule, if you need to bill 8 hours a day, you really need to work 10 to 12 hours a day. Because, you have to go to lunch and eat and go to the bathroom and try to get some fresh air here and there. So there were days I was kind of a 7 a.m. start and might work into 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, depending, maybe 6 days a week. So it varied across the years.
Was this trial dependent, or was it just across the board?
It's just busy. So when you work at big, busy firms, there's always stuff to do. And some of it was dependent on whether you were doing litigation, but whether you're a litigator or a transactional attorney, there are deals that require lots of hours and work. And so it fluctuated. But yeah, there was definitely lots of times when I was busier than others. And you can definitely feel the difference in those yearly, hour requirements.
We've talked about the types of firms that you were at, but we haven't talked about the work that you were doing. Was it always employment-related work, or did you start in different areas and kind of fall into this area as far as your focus, your passion?
Well, I was always a litigator in the sense that I did business litigation, employment litigation. I did some trade secret work, some trademark litigation, appellate work. So at every firm, in the sense, you do a little bit of what's needed and where you're needed. But as my career progressed, it went from 6 things to 4 things to then really focusing on the employment side of things. So, but that really extends to everything from the hiring all the way through the employment relationship to the terminations and when the litigation happens, as well as trade secret work or when employees leave and breach agreements, those sort of things. So it can get more expansive than you think. But yes, at the big firms, it was, 90, 95% litigation, very little of the transactional employment work, which is guiding clients on how to do things right, training people, teaching them this is the best practice so you can avoid those lawsuits. So I really had a craving to sort of help them stop getting sued. And I know you can never stop getting sued. Everyone says, well, how do I not get sued, Krista? And I joke and I say, don't have employees. And so, one of those things is as you grow your business, there are risks involved. And so if you are a risk-averse person, then don't go start a business. Go get a job. It's a better way for you. But yeah, as I went off on my own, I really wanted to flip the model and focus on, okay, let's try to do the right thing and educate people and help people make smart decisions. And of course, lawsuits happen and we take them. But even today, I don't go out proactively looking for litigation. I only litigate for current clients or direct referrals that I may get from other lawyer colleagues.
To accelerate into what you are doing now, what does that look like in terms of sitting down with a potential client or current client and providing that kind of advice to help make the client be, to paraphrase the Army, the best employer the client can be?
Well, sadly, most of the time people walk into our office in crisis. So us lawyers, we are sponges for the stress of other business owners. And so most people do not come in as I'd love them to, saying, I'm starting a new company. I want to do everything right. Help us. And we do that probably 20, 30% of the time. But most of the time, clients are coming to us because they need to fire an employee and it's a sticky situation and they need some extra help. Or they've been sued. They have a government audit that they're dealing with. They have a complaint that's been filed with the EEOC or the DFEH, the various government agencies that oversee workplace issues. And so they're coming in to get our help during that crisis situation, which we do. So we help them. We try to get as best of a resolution as we can. But at the same time, if they have tolerance for it, we're trying to figure out, okay, what happened here? Was this a one-off? You just got a bad seed employee, or is there an issue that needs to be addressed? And some of it's just education. A lot of small business owners don't understand the laws, don't understand the rules, or they maybe understood the law that happened 15, 20 years ago. But now the laws in California are evolving and changing so quickly that, something that was legal 2, 3 years ago may be illegal today. And if you're not really tapped into what's going on, you may miss it. And so we try to do a lot of education and really help our owners understand the basics, get them compliant, and then be there for them as a resource. I jokingly say, call the bat phone before you do something so you can get some good advice on how to move forward.
And when you say have the tolerance, that are some of the individuals that you work with, I don't want to say resistant, but one doesn't necessarily want to look at the ugliness or the underbelly of what one might be doing, I guess.
Sure. No one wants to feel like they made a huge mistake, but we try to be sensitive to that and really understand that honestly, I've been doing this almost 25 years. Most business owners don't go in with a malicious intent to really take advantage of workers. Most of the time, it's just ignorance. They didn't take the time to really understand how to run a business. And if you think about it, a lot of people end up in the business because it was a family business that they took over, or service professionals. You're good at being a lawyer, so you get elevated to partner, and now you have to manage people. But maybe you never wanted to manage people. Maybe that's not your strong suit. And then you go out on your own to start your own firm, and you're a great lawyer, but do you want to have to deal with HR and payroll and questions that come up and those types of things? So not everyone has that business side of them. And, of all of our clients, there is a huge range of risk tolerance that any business owner has. I have some clients, we'll educate them, we'll walk them up the stairs, we'll talk to them about choices they have. And they'll say, nope, it's only one person. I'm doing it wrong. I know I'm doing it wrong now, and I'm okay with it. I'm willing to take on that risk. And if I get sued, I get sued. Okay, I'm not running your business. You have to make that choice, but I've now educated you on your possible risk. And I have other clients that say, no, Krista, I want to do everything the right way. We're going to flip everybody from being paid salary to hourly, or we're going to turn all those contractors into employees because I don't want to get sued ever. And I say, okay, well, let's then think about what the implications of that will be for your business. And so it really runs the gamut on what people are willing to tolerate, because it's not just the legal compliance. Is what's the business side of it? What's the business decision here? How much is it going to cost you? And then what's the implication for your culture and how your company runs and what you do? Are there PR implications? So a lot of lawyers just look at the compliance question as opposed to looking at the big picture about how it could affect other areas of their business.
PR, short for public relations, that's the second time that's come up. And I think you also talked about crisis communications and other pieces. Are there situations where your clients have found themselves in the media in a way that they may not want to be? And how, I'm going to ask a compound question because no one can object. How does that fit into the role and the service that you provide to your clients to be holistic in terms of the situation?
Well, a lot of it really is what you're comfortable with. And we as professionals train all our attorneys to be, cross-dimensional in the areas of law they think about. We do have other areas of practice at the firm besides employment law, but we kind of fashion ourselves a little bit as outside general counsel who happen to be specialists. So we bring in the right attorneys on the right situations. But a lot of our clients look to us anytime anything stressful happens. So if they have an issue that comes up, they will come to us. And then if it's not something our team has expertise on, we will bring in other professionals to help support them. But, I'll get texts on a Saturday night at, midnight saying, my kid's been arrested on a DUI. What do I do? And so when you are in that position of being a trusted advisor and confidant and consigliere for a client, it's a huge honor position. And I really take it seriously. And I try to take all the calls and really help everyone however I can. So when someone comes, and I'll just give a, hypothetical, we represent a lot of hospitality clients. So restaurant groups, famous chefs, those types of folks. There will be times when they'll get a call from someone at the Chronicle that a big article is coming out about something that happened. And they're stressed out, nervous. What's the implication there? And so we talk them through it, figure out what we can do. Oftentimes we might get on the phone with the writer, or we might talk to the rest of their team that's dealing with it if they have a PR company they work with, to see what we can do, or what's the spin, or how's this going to impact them. So again, if we can be helpful, I want to be. I joke that I'm not just an attorney. I'm also a therapist and an educator and a counselor, a PR wannabe expert. I'm not the expert, but, lawyers' jobs are much more nuanced than just, okay, here's the law, yes or no. It's more than that if you actually get into someone's business and help them with all those various elements that are going on.
That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we're talking about a larger group of people than you and an associate at a kitchen table at this point. Perhaps you can help us understand how that growth occurred. Was it intentional? Did it happen immediately? Did you have any tools that you used as you evolved the business?
Well, it started out, with the clients that I had, and then that grew, and I met wonderful, referral partners who would trust our work and send us their clients, and then we would reciprocate. And I met a lot of great attorneys along the way. And that's how, I ended up with various partners and collaborations and associate attorneys. So lots of introductions that way. So it was a very organic path to how we grew. I didn't go out and try to get VC money and really grow the firm overnight. It was really a gradual, okay, now all the attorneys we have on our bench are at a certain capacity. We need to hire someone new on, so then we can take it to the next level. So we really got better over the years of looking at the metrics, looking at how we run the firm, how do we spend money, what are the budgets, what are the needs of the clients, and trying to be adept and nimble in changing how we do business to really serve the client's needs. So over the years, that's how we added various practice groups, because clients liked the fact that, we were former big firm lawyers, being more proactive, preventative. They didn't want to have to go to 5 different law firms and manage them. So the more services we had under one roof were great. So we had excellent attorneys, great collaboration. We worked together, and that proved to be successful. So that's kind of been the growth path over the years.
We talked a bit about your, what I will call excessive hours, having been a excessive hour person myself when I was younger. And I want to kind of probe how your firm operates now in terms of the expectations for your lawyers.
Sure.
And the reason there's a background to this. Rightly or wrongly, in the era that I think you and I grew up in, the expectation was in your first 10 to 20 years of work, you were going to grind.
That's
and
it.
There was a joke at the office. I think I went 7 years without taking a vacation. And there was a joke that I was being paid, in essence, minimum wage.
And it was also a badge of honor in a way.
Well, not only was it a badge of honor, I feel if I worked 80 hours a week, I was learning twice as much in the same amount of time.
Sure.
And I wanted to be the best. There's a different, I'm also, my divorced from my first wife and did not have the most
There are a lot
fun.
of consequences to that.
So this is the backdrop, the long lead in for a question on, people talk about work-life balance now. And And there is an importance in not being so tied to your job that you're only living to work. At the same time, there's an expectation when running a high quality business and servicing your clients that you are providing a service. And so this is, like I said, a lengthy lead in to how do you manage the expectations of employees, which seem to be a little bit different in current era than before, as well as providing high-end service to the clients that you have?
Sure. Lots of angles there and elements. I do think there's been a shift in the workplace to address that to begin with. The way we were hazed and pushed back, 20 years ago is very different than you should be running a business today. Now, that being said, that's a difference between not working hard. So a lot of the young kids or clients will call and say, oh, these generation blahers, right? They all have opinions about the different generations.
Notice I did not say anything about younger people not working hard.
And it's not even about that because it's about the people. So I have great employees across all generations, and it really has nothing to do with the generation. Some of it's the mindset and some of it is expectations, but employers really do have to set clear expectations with employees. And so our hours requirements are much lower than what I had growing up in the legal community. But it doesn't mean we don't work hard, and it doesn't mean we don't have a great level of service. And I think that you can have a great work-life balance if that's what you're going for. And there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. There was such a stigma about, oh, we're a lifestyle firm. I mean, I don't know about that, but I don't want to be going to the hospital about stress and chronic fatigue and, drinking too much. That's why lawyers have the highest level of alcoholism, right? Because they have to drink to calm down after work.
Got that checkbox
right?
too.
And so there's really a need to just acknowledge that you don't have to work an 80-hour week to be successful. There are lots of ways to be successful, and there are huge shelves of books at bookstores about, the 4-hour work week and all this stuff, right? Everyone's trying to figure out how do you work smarter, not harder. For me, what I found when I went out on my own was that I wasn't necessarily working less. I was working differently. Because when you run a firm, you have to think about the 3 buckets, right? You have to bring in the work, do the work, and run the firm, right? The strategy side of things. And at any given point in time, the percentages that you're working on those various buckets are different. And if you decide, hey, this is where my interest is, I'm going to spend time on business development and not do the work, well, then you have to hire someone to do the work and have a seamless transition to clients that they don't expect you and they're going to be happy with whoever on your team is doing the work. But at the same time, you have to have an eye to the strategy. How are you growing your firm? How are you running things? Are you on budget or not, right? Do you hire someone to do operations or not? So being a business owner is multifaceted. And then if you still want to practice law, you have to figure out how to work that in. So what I appreciated about having my own firm was the flexibility. And at various points in my life, I've billed more and did business development less. And then other times it's, a different percentage. But I definitely became a healthier person. I was able to really, take care of myself, to focus on my kids when I had them, to be able to spend more time with my family. I too got divorced. That was a stressful time. Then COVID hit. Then my dad got sick. Then my dad died. I couldn't have done that without the support of the team and having this great group of people. And so I think part of it's being really intentional about how do you want to live your life? What do you want your work to look like? And figuring that out. Because I'm a hard worker. It's hard for me not to work hard. That's just who I am. But I also like to play and have fun, and I want to travel and live a balanced life. So I do think the one nice thing about COVID is, that curtain that we all put up about our lives and lying about why we had to leave work early for a meeting, when we really had to go to our kids' thing, but we didn't want anyone to think we were doing that. That all went out the door during COVID. So now I think we've had an acknowledgement that we're all human beings. We all want to do good work and work hard. And a little bit of flexibility is okay. So I've coached a lot of CEOs and clients about, hey, is a butt in a seat what matters, or is productivity what matters? Because it's really harder to manage a remote workforce. So there's been so much evolution about that. But then when you also have these employees, the company's saying, okay, you have to come back into work 3 days a week. And the employers are like, well, I don't want to. You can't make me. And it's like, well, we absolutely can make you. So that's also an interesting aha moment for the first job employee who has never had to deal with that before. They don't realize that, yes, a company can make you go out back and work because they've only worked in a remote environment. So I don't know. I'll never be out of a job because people are people. and the world keeps changing and there's always some new question coming up. And it's super interesting because, people are people.
You seem like a very interesting person to ask about the remote, hybrid, in-person work environments, both from the entrepreneur perspective of running your own business, but also from the number of businesses that you interact with.
Yes.
And I've had this conversation with a lot of law firm operators, a lot of my friends. And there are some who are very insistent. Our culture is dependent upon our people being there. Well, do you go in? Well, no, but it's important that our people be there.
Yeah, double standard.
That's been a bit of it. And I don't know that it's intentional. I think that some of it is, today I need to go to do this for this client or that for that client, or I don't have the time to be able to commute into the office, so people will be okay if I'm not there. My question is, how have you found the best way to operate your firm in terms of hybrid, remote, in-person, to make sure that you maintain some semblance of culture?
We've done a hybrid. We were lucky in that when COVID happened, we were already pretty advanced in our technology. Everyone had laptops. Most things were in the cloud. Our documents were in the cloud. So we didn't have, crazy servers in a closet somewhere. And lawyers are typically, 15, 20, 30 years behind when it comes to technology. So I think that was a big wake-up call for a lot of service firms in more traditional industries because they just hadn't modernized in the way they should have. So for us, COVID hits, everyone took their laptop, some notepads, some pens, we sent everybody an extra screen at home and we all went home. And, we were already on Zoom. So again, we were lucky. Most people didn't know about Zoom until COVID hit. Now, I think that then it became, well, how do you maintain culture? How do you onboard employees when you're not in the office? And so that became a really tricky one. And how many Zoom meetings do you have? How often are you meeting? How many days are you meeting? What's going on? So we really came up with a meeting schedule. I started having one-on-one meetings with employees just so we could talk and stay connected. We tried to meet in a park and sit 6 feet apart and have a picnic lunch, And then as things changed, we definitely said, you know what? Nobody wants to come back full time, but there is a value in that personal interaction, especially for the extroverts. The introverts loved COVID. Right? They were totally great, never going into the office, but us extroverts suffered. And there's just a balance. So I think that if you're a good manager and you know your metrics and you know how to connect with people, being a good leader, it's not going to be hard to maintain good culture. I think that it really did separate out the strong leaders from maybe those that didn't have such great skills in that area. So another thing that was interesting that came out of COVID, when I talk about leadership, it became really apparent who was a natural leader, who needed help, how do you train managers, how do you train people? And, I think over 10 years ago, Gallup did a study that said of 10 people, 1 in 10 are natural leaders, 2 more can be trained to be a good manager or leader, 7 in 10 people should never be in management. So in industries like law, where you get elevated to partner because you're a good lawyer, not necessarily because you're a good manager, it's been an interesting kind of path to see who really embraces training people, mentoring, helping people, supporting them, and then putting that time in. So to your point about, the folks that say, well, you have to be a butt in a seat, but I'm not going to be. Part of that is, they're never going to be loyal to someone they don't respect. And if you're not working hard and leading by example, it's a trickle-down theory. And I have found time and time again that the companies where the leader sets the example, sets the tone, gets it, looks into how to be a better leader, tries to really integrate, people, culture, humanity into the business, they're always more successful because your people are one of your number one assets. And if you don't prioritize the people, you're going to fail. And so I do a lot of CEO coaching to help them with where to go. And then if they need to get a one-on-one coach or something, we do a lot of management training, Management 101. So even an hour with your attorney or your coach or a trainer to walk them through, okay, what if this happens? How do you handle it? What do you say? Right? Because companies don't usually get sued. It's managers who get sued. So even though the company gets sued, it was the manager that caused it. Right? People don't leave companies, they leave managers. So you'll never get a lawsuit of just your firm. It's always going to be, and so who was my supervisor, who did this thing to me or treated me in this way. So that extra step of making people feel confident in a management role, people don't like conflict. Even lawyers, most lawyers I know can't even have difficult conversations. So when you're dealing with your employees, that's a confrontation that no one wants to deal with. Really helping people get through that fear is important. And again, they don't have to fix the problem. That's why you call your lawyer, but they need to identify the issue and alert someone so something can be done. And I just think that it's really interesting. And that's why there are a lot of lawsuits, with our mental health system as inept as it is. And everyone's stressed after COVID. Claims have gone up. Stress claims, those turn into workers' comp claims, leaves of absence. Everyone's filing complaints right and left, even though they aren't really complaints or issues that should be. And it's all because no one's dealing with their own trauma. So they come to work dealing with it. And then it becomes the employer's issue, right? So dealing with the personalities, the people, the communication styles, it's all so interesting. But, it's one of those things you have to deal with, or you'll have lots of conflict with your people.
You've said so much there, and all of it great. The piece that really sticks out for me that I think I want to follow up on, because it resonated, is an unhappy employee doesn't sue a firm, it sues a manager. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that in terms of what you've seen unfold and what sort of proactive strategies an employer can use to head that off.
Well, I guess if everyone thinks back at all the jobs you left, why did you leave? And I can think about all the great people I worked with, but the reason I left was the person that was awful, right? And so I think to start, you want to hire the right people, but that really means knowing what your culture is, what are you expecting, and having a better hiring process. Because if you get the right people in the door, that's your best place to make the right step. It's much cheaper to keep a good person than it is to find a good person, and high turnover is expensive. So I really like to think through, okay, bring on the right people first. But number two, when you elevate someone to a management position, just don't let them flail. Right? Really talk to them about, do you want to manage people? How do you feel about mentoring? What are your skill sets? Have you ever managed before? How can we support you? Right? And some of these great options out there are, hiring coaches for people, having training seminars, just doing more of that communication is great. But I also think that you learn a lot when people exit. So exit interviews and communicating with people. But people don't like to get data oftentimes. They don't want to have the difficult conversation of, what did I do well? What could I improve on? But again, I think when you routinize those conversations and make them just part of your daily culture, it makes it really easy for employees to communicate and for employees to share. I heard once that if you meet weekly with someone and they feel heard and listened to, they're going to tell you when they're unhappy, as opposed to just quitting. Right? And not everyone's going to do that. Some people just are never going to share, and then they'll just be like, I'm fine, I'm out. So you have to also expect that too. I remember when my first employee that I loved quit, I was devastated. And then I realized, okay, I'm a business owner now. I mean, they're going to stay as long as they're going to stay. And she didn't leave because of me or anyone. It was just time to go on to a bigger firm or try something else. But you have to walk in every day knowing that someone might quit, or a client might have an issue come up that you have to step in on immediately, or they might, have another problem you have to help with, right? There's so much that could come. But I think helping your managers feel better about that, communicating with your employees, being the kind of culture that allows people to be open about what's worrying them. And then don't shy away from the feedback, right? When you have the door open and you can talk to someone about what they're doing well or what they're not doing well, use that as an opportunity to train them and help them, right? Because if you just fire someone and they have no idea what they're doing wrong, that's when they're going to get pissed at you. And the story they're going to make up is going to be way worse than the truth. So be brave, have the conversation that's difficult, and figure out how you can support them. And once you've tried and tried, then it's okay to say, you know what, this is just not going to work out, and these are the reasons why. But at least you gave that person a chance to turn it around and to really take your feedback to heart and try to do better.
You're making me think of there's a parable in the book Radical Candor about, and I think it's an example of ruinous empathy, where the manager knows the person is not doing their job well and likes them, and so doesn't want to hurt their feelings by saying anything. And it goes on for a year until she has to sit down and tell that person that they're being fired, instead of having the opportunity to address it head on early and perhaps have some course correction along the way.
Well, most people are good people. I mean, I'm an optimist at the end of the day, even though what I do is pretty difficult. And I jokingly say, you need to assume every employee is going to sue you, which is very cynical. However, I'm an optimist. I like most people. Most people are good people. They just might not be in the right job. And I think it's really hard for people to sit there and look in the mirror and say, you know what, you're right. This job isn't for me. I hate this job. Because, money and status and ego and, all of the things that go into it. But I think that if people really slow down and think about it, it's better to get out of that bad job to be able to find a better job. Just like a relationship. Like, don't be lazy. Don't stay in a bad relationship if it's not working for you. Because, people are worried though. I know what color this grass is. I don't want to leave. It might be worse. You know what? Yes, it might be. But it might be better. But again, everything's based in fear. And so I think part of it is we need to acknowledge this. We need to acknowledge that your employees are human, and that manager who really likes that person, of course they don't want to have that difficult conversation. So then train them in it. I do difficult conversation training all the time. And it's hard and not everyone can take the feedback. But that's also a disservice we do to people and our children. When you just shoot sunshine up people's asses all the time, it's really hard then for them to go to a job and get negative feedback. I had a client once call me and say, Krista, I was doing my employees review and their mother showed up with them, right? They didn't.
Is that not normal?
It's not normal, no, but it happens. Or parents will call and, step in, right? We have to let people kind of grow up, but you have to learn how to take the good with the bad. But also employers need to learn how to give positive feedback as well. And just because you give someone positive feedback doesn't mean the negative feedback is not important and you can't fire them, right? So be a nice person, be straight with people. But if you think it's not going to work out, give them a heads up and say, hey, you're showing up late to work all the time. Is there anything I can do to support you? Why is this happening? Let us help you out, right? That's very different than saying, why can't you show up to work on time, you lazy SOB? Make it about the policy, make it about the requirement, don't make it about the person. And again, these are just little tweaks that once you'll show up differently as a manager. But if you didn't know, you might just show up how you showed up with your siblings or your parents or, that ex relationship that was really toxic. So we have to kind of teach people some skills to help them show up differently in the workplace too.
A question that I have, and I'll couch this in, I've never thought that I'm a very good manager.
Okay.
I feel that I'm a good mentor.
Okay. And they're different. You're right.
They are. It's the holding people accountable side. I tend to drift off and move on to other things. I'll give somebody an assignment and I expect them to do it right and do it well. And I don't really want to have to. And you
expect them to be you and you wouldn't need any guidance.
Correct. And I'm not looking for a free coaching session.
It's all right. See, I told you, lawyer, therapist, coach.
But it is kind of a broad question. Can you have someone who is a good leader, but not necessarily a good manager?
100%.
And how does that show up in the workplace?
Think about the people that you have worked for who were visionaries. They showed up at a meeting, they sparkled. Everyone got really excited after they threw out the new strategy plan or this and that. But every time they gave you a project, they never gave you feedback. They never told you where to start. They didn't give you a deadline. You constantly had to be trying to get more and more feedback, more and more help. Pay attention to me. It happens all the time.
So how do you, I'm propping up is the wrong phrase, but
well, some of it's about acknowledging who people are.
Okay.
Sometimes you can have a visionary and then you can have managers that are different, right? You can have someone who's leading the firm, bringing in business, out there being a thought leader, but don't let them manage people because they're awful. And you can have great lawyers who are really good at doing the work, but not great supervisors. So let them bill, let them do the work. Don't expect them to mentor anyone. Or if you're expecting them to like redo work, then the associate gives that partner the brief, they redline it, they show the associate the red lines and why they made them, and then they move on. And then someone else can sit down and say, hey, this is now the third time working partner has had to give you this feedback, and I'm going to mentor you and help you. Why are we not learning from these lessons, right? And it's great if it can be the same person, but oftentimes it can't. I think that it's just really important for people to start looking in the mirror, whether you're the worker or the manager or the leader. Acknowledging your strengths and areas of opportunity is really important. We all have things that we're good at, and we all have places that we can improve. I think that's why there's so many wonderful, CEO groups out there for the leader, and there's other management training programs for the mid-level manager. And when you're new to your career, go to all the trainings and CLEs you can, right? There's lots of ways to learn and grow as a professional. And I think that lifelong feeling of curiosity serves people well if you have it. If you don't have it, it's another muscle to build, right? People think they're stagnant, that they can't change. People can change if they want to. And I've seen it happen. And a lot of times clients will call me and say, I've talked to this associate 3, 4, 5 times. They're not changing. I said, well, did you sit down and help them? Did you give them ideas about how they could be better at time management? Did you send them to a writing class to improve their legal analysis? Did you do this, that, and the other? No, 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 no. Okay, well, do you like them as a person? Yes. Okay, well, invest in them then. If they're good clay, you can mold them, but you have to put in effort, resources, work. And there are a lot of companies out there that talk a big game and then they put no money behind what they're doing, right? The clients that will say, oh, we really care about DEIB and diversifying our firm. And then they don't hold any training, or they don't expand who their pool is that they're trying to interview to hire, or they don't, look beyond the, easy low-hanging fruit candidates, right? You have to kind of think about who you want to be as a company and who it's going to take to get you there, and then what resources you're going to put behind that. So I just always think that the companies that do any amount of communication, training, acknowledgement, they just always do better and they get sued less. Now, again, it doesn't mean you won't get sued, but how you care about your people really reflects on you as a company.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think it's important to recognize that while one may still face people who depart who are unhappy for one reason or another, the ability, as you said, to look in the mirror and know that you are doing the right thing, regardless of what the outcome is.
Yeah, love them on the way out, I always jokingly say, So even if they're ready to leave, you can offer to be at least a neutral reference. You don't have to go out there and badmouth them, but you can be neutral. You can offer them places to, go look for other resources or jobs. Maybe give them an idea of what you think they would excel at. So there's just lots of ways to do it, but everyone gets really nervous. Oh, if I say too much, I'll get sued. It's like, well, if you're that kind of person, you might get sued anyway. So
you talked about coaching in difficult conversations. And I know that there are a few, I mentioned Radical Candor as one book. I know there's Harvard Negotiation Project's Difficult Conversations. Can you give a framework of how you approach that kind of a training or your people approach that?
I use different skills depending on the group and how they're going to take it. And usually it's often less formal than most of those types of programs. I'll usually use scenarios and talk through, okay, you have an employee that isn't performing. How do you acknowledge it? How do you document it? What level do you take it to, right? What works for your firm? Because culturally, some companies, they document everything, right? Everyone has to sign everything all the time. They're used to that. That's what makes them feel good. But that doesn't work for every culture.
I can't imagine the people who are having to sign things feel particularly good about that.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
But if you're a big corporate culture, you have to routinize certain things just to make it easier for yourself when you have that many employees. But if you're a smaller 10, 20, 30 person firm, you can have more human interactions, right? You don't have to have such obvious CYA emails. But, I always think that it's better to have more communication than less. I used to do a seminar with a great plaintiff side attorney who's a good friend, and he'd laugh. He's like, any communication is better than no communication. So Krista, even if your clients write bad communication, they're still trying and it's better for them. And I hate it. I love it when clients don't communicate because then I can come in and craft whatever story I want on behalf of my plaintiff employees. So I really, number one, it's great to get advice and have your counsel help you properly document certain situations. But even if you have your HR team or anyone else, if you go on a walk and talk with someone, you walk through where they need to improve, put a deadline on it when you're going to follow up, send a follow-up email. Hey, thanks for that chat today. I really appreciate you hearing my feedback. I'm going to check in with you in a month and see how you're doing on hitting deadlines and tightening up your writing and showing up to work on time. I mean, it's just a nice way to follow up. And now you have a written contemporaneous record of the feedback you gave the person. So when, a day before they think you're going to fire them, they file a harassment complaint, you can say, we'd already decided to terminate them way back because I documented it. So just, and it's also great. Some people are visual learners. So they might have had a conversation with you, but then when you put it in writing, they can't twist that conversation. They can read it, they can digest what they're supposed to do, and they know they're going to be followed up on. So it's not a bad idea.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of Krista Mitzel. Tune in next week for part 2. Like what you heard? Share us with a colleague and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. To all of you doing justice out there, happy hunting.